Do they implode, or do good people get together and force the implosion?
A democratic coalition, when it pulls together, when it pulls its resources together for a single common goal, is unbeatable by any autocrat, because they're always going to be better. And the reason they're always going to be better is because they're better at harnessing stuff, and they've got more checks and balances on that ultimate power and that direction in which way something's happening. Because someone like Churchill or Roosevelt, they were their own men, they knew what they were thinking, they had their own mind, but they were surrounded by people who gave them advice, who could say, oh, I'm not sure about that, or that's a really bad idea, or definitely not, or I think you might want to consider this. And they'd listen. Ultimately, they're making decisions, but they're still listening. An autocrat doesn't listen. An autocrat is surrounded by paranoia and suspicion at every single turn. So he's hearing what he wants to hear rather than reality, and that doesn't make you make good decisions.
Welcome to Open Book. I am your host, Anthony Scaramucci. Joining me now, my favorite historian. How about that, James Holland? My favorite historian.
Stop it.
Because, I'm a big World War II buff, and I've read just about everything. I have a whole column of James Holland books, but the one we're going to talk about today, best-selling author and historian, the one we're going to talk about today is Victory 45. It's the 80th anniversary of VE Day, the end of the war in 8 surrenders. What a great book. You know what, James, I will say this about you. I'm a history buff, so I think I know everything. I'm a little bit smug about it. But every time I read one of your books, I learn something that I didn't know. So I want to applaud you for that. And
well, thank you.
And by the way, we're both part of the Goal Hanger family. See that? So we
yes,
can't
we
get...
are.
You're stuck with me, James. There's an unconditionality to family, as you know, so you have no choice to be with me. But
it's like joining in a kind of an Italian family, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. You got to take
you're
all
sat around the kind of proverbial table.
Yes, you got to take all
wine,
the dysfunction,
eating kind of beautiful food.
Yep, you got to take all the bombast and all the dysfunction, but you have to stay in love. Okay, so
do you think Tony is the mother?
He could have. He's a maternal. He has some maternal instinct. I think Caddy would be in disagreement with me on that, but that's what makes our podcast a good podcast. But I want to talk about love for a second, because where does this love of history, and for those of you that are listening, James is sitting there in front of this amazing bookshelf that I want to take a picture of, and I recognize a lot of those books that they're actually on my bookshelf. But where does this love of history come from?
Well, I think it was as a child. My big bro is Tom, who's also part of the Goal Hanger staple, and co-hosts Rest is History with Dominic, of course. And he's 2.5 years older than me, and he kind of sort of bossed the kind of the kind of fraternal thing a bit when we were kids, and we had loads of little ladybird books on kind of Nelson, or we had a great one on the Bighorn, the Battle of the Little Bighorn. Had a kind of sort of picture of Custer in his buckskins on the front, kind of shooting his pistol, surrounded by Native Americans, and about to go down. So it was all kind of sort of part of growing up, really. And when we went on vacation, we didn't go to exotic ski holidays or anything like that. We went to Hadrian's Wall, or we did the castles of the Welsh marches or something like that. So it would kind of, it was just kind of in the blood a bit. And then I studied a lot of history at school, at high school, and then I went to university and I studied, just like a single bachelor's degree in history as well. So, it's kind of there right from the word go.
Oh, I mean, this, to me, you are a inspiration and a role model, because I tell my kids, you got to do something you love. Because if you do something you love, you're never working, okay? And I find your love of history and your insatiable curiosity infectious, and I love hanging out with you for that reason. And I've learned a lot.
Well, thank you.
I've learned a lot about World War II from this book, because you took a different angle than most historians. Of course, you wrote it with your podcast co-host, Al Murray, who you and I have had the great opportunity to be on your podcast, which I'm grateful for. But you take us...
Well, you were fantastic on that. It was thanks for coming on.
Well, listen, it's a great joy.
Well,
for
we're
me.
Mutual fans of Truman and Co., aren't we? And Roosevelt and FDR.
Yeah, I want to talk about
that era.
I want to talk about this because these were exceptional people. They were less focused on their own aggrandizement and more focused on what the hell was going to go on for the world.
Yeah, and
I also think that, and I'll just say this to you, they got a lot right. They got a lot right, and they did a lot of things that made our world, the one you and I were born into, in the 1950s and 60s. They made our world a better world. But you talk about 8 surrenders, which is interesting because, we learn about it as a one single VE day. But tell us why you chose 8 surrenders. What was the thought there?
Well, actually, the whole thing was quite funny because years ago, like literally 20 years ago, I did a little TV program. It's my first little bit of ever I'd done of telly, and I did a little documentary about the end of the war in Europe. And what we realized when we were kind of researching that was that actually the one day where there weren't any surrenders was Victory in Europe Day, which is the 8th of May, 1945. The surrender actually happened kind of in the early hours of the 7th of May, and then it was kind of signed off with the Russians, the Soviet Union, in the early hours of the 9th of May. But actually, nothing happened on the 8th, and I always thought that was kind of curious. And then you sort of think, well, okay, so if the Allies laid down in January 1943 at the Casablanca Conference, if FDR, President Roosevelt, comes up and suddenly announces to the world's press that the only unconditional surrender is going to do, then when is the first unconditional surrender? And the first unconditional surrender is in Italy. Well, actually, strictly speaking, it's Italy, but they don't really realize they've signed up to unconditional surrender because there's kind of short terms and long terms, and that's back in September 1943. But to end the actual war, the first unconditional surrender is in Italy on the 2nd of May. Comes into being on the 2nd of May, and then you've got the huge number of German troops surrendering to Field Marshal Montgomery, British commander in northern Germany. On the afternoon of the 4th of May, coming into being on the 5th of May. By the way, also you've got the surrender of Berlin to the Red Army on the 2nd of May. Then you've got the surrender of German forces in Bavaria and Austria to 6th Army Group. Everyone forgets them. On the 5th of May. So suddenly it's quite a lot. And then you've got 2 for Japan, because you've got actually the kind of, okay, we're going to throw in the towel on the 15th of August, but then you've got the actual surrender ceremony on the USS Missouri in Tokyo Bay on the 2nd of September. So we originally thought, well, we'll do 6, and then we totted it up and realized we miscounted because we're rubbish at math, and then realized it was 8. So that's why it's the surrender in 8 surrenders.
I don't know if you've had the chance to be on the USS Missouri, but when I went to Hawaii, I took my wife to Hawaii. I said, I'm sorry, we got to stop at the Pearl Harbor Memorial, and I had to go to the USS Missouri. And of course, I stood on the deck where the signing was, and they've got have you been to this? Have you seen this?
I haven't. It's absolutely on my massive to-do list, which is to go to.
But I do insist, if you make it to Hawaii, stop in Honolulu and go visit this war memorial. But what always impressed me about it is the ship. We see it as this massive magisterial thing, but it's actually quite small. And when you think about what happened on the ship and the significance of the ship, and of course, whatever the peccadillos were of General MacArthur and the vanity of him and some of the foibles of him, the Japanese government still has lots of elements of the Constitution that he put in place in the 1940s, in 1945 and 6 and 7. And he had a lot of respect for that culture, which has led to great long-term legacy of success for the country in the post-World War II era. So it's just phenomenal vectors that come off all of these surrenders. I want to go to Karl Wolff, who's the SS general, who is obviously famous in your book for art theft. He's famous for money laundering. He's
also smooth as glass, by the way.
Yeah.
This guy is a really smooth operator.
Yeah,
he's charming.
This part of your book,
he's kind of likes the ladies,
100%. And this reads like a fiction thriller. So tell us about Karl Wolff and tell us about him at the end of the Second World War.
Well, he's an absolute SOB. I just want to kind of put that right down there now. He's an evil Nazi bastard, and he should have had it coming. But he also happens to be a kind of credit where credit's due. He's an incredible manipulator. He's an incredible political operator. And he is joint number 2, because this is the way the Nazis do things. They never have kind of single standouts, because the only standout can be Hitler. So everyone else is on some kind of sort of warped parallel command structure. And this is how it works all the way down. So you have Himmler, who is head of the SS, but under him are 2 equal standing subordinate SS guys, Karl Wolff and Ernst Kaltenbrunner. And they hate each other's guts, as is the way with this kind of setup, because everyone's constantly pitched against each other. And they're rivals for attention and positioning and all the rest of it. So of course they hate each other. But they're also very different. You know, Karl Wolff is German and a kind of sort of jack about town. Kaltenbrunner is a Viennese lawyer and kind of, you know, slightly humorless, and he's kind of 6'6" or 6'5" or something, and got dueling scars and all the rest of it. But Karl Wolff has mildly disgraced himself by being morally corrupt, and he's morally corrupt in the Nazi state by divorcing his wife. I mean, can you imagine the Nazi regime anything quite as awful as divorce? I mean, really. So anyway, so he's been banished from Hitler's headquarters to run the show in Italy. And although Mussolini has been he was deposed in July 1943, then imprisoned by the Italians. He's then sprung in September 1943 and put in charge of a puppet government in the north, the RSI, the Socialist Republic of Italy. It is Wolff running the show. Kesselring, Field Marshal Kesselring, is running the show on the ground in terms of the military stuff. Wolff is doing everything else. And he realizes pretty quickly that, well into 1944, that they're not going to win. And so suddenly all that kind of Nazi ideology bullshit that they've been really into, he's suddenly chucking that out with the dishwater and thinking, how am I going to save my neck? So he starts being very, very slack on partisans. He starts letting people strike in Milan and all the rest of it, not being too harsh, and showing what a lovely, decent, fair-minded guy he is, who kind of, at his heart, he just loves being decent, and all he wants to do is save lives and end the war. What he really wants to do, of course, is save his neck. So he pursues peace feelers with Allen Dulles, who I'm sure any upstanding American will have heard of, but he at the time was the OSS man in Bern in Switzerland. OSS later
became the CIA director, was head of the Warren Commission. Yep,
right, all of that. Yeah. So he's not he's in the middle of his career, but he hasn't reached the dizzy heights he's going to reach. But he's still the main man. He's the same main US guy in Switzerland, and Wolff actually does, again, credit where credit's due, put his neck on the line. He does some pretty brave stuff and stuff that's very, very high risk. But he also puts up various kind of sort of insurance policies, such as stealing all Italy's art treasures and keeping them for safekeeping. I mean, you understand, what he's going to do is he's going to keep them from Hitler, but he's also going to keep them as a bargaining chip as well. And doing various other measures to ensure that he gives himself the best possible chance of getting out of this horrible mess that the Nazis have got themselves into at the end of the war. It's just the most ridiculous story. And you're right about Hollywood. I always could imagine sort of Quentin Tarantino making a film about this.
Yeah. Well, I mean, look at the ugliness of it. There's listen, I want to test this on you. I feel like we often talk about the single man theory of history.
Yeah.
But I think that there's like a great man and a really bad man theories. Hear me out for a second. The American Revolution, lots of enlightened philosophers framed the Constitution. It's a set of very good men trying to come up with an idyllic protocol to prevent tyranny. At the flip side is Nazi Germany. You have these homicidal maniacs that get together, actually take over a sovereign nation, and they work together to corrupt each other. I always tell my kids, hey, you're the weighted average of the 5 people you hang out with. Think of who Hitler was hanging out with, okay? Evil personified, but he's hanging out with guys like this, and he's hanging out with Goering and Himmler and all these different characters that we see on the stage, Goebbels, etc. So I guess the point I'm making, though, is, do they implode? Or do we good people get together and force the implosion? Meaning,
good people get together and force the implosion.
That's what it is ultimately, right? Because look at what's going on in Russia. Look at what's going on in other authoritarian states.
Okay, this is my, and I'll be interested to see your take on this. This is my theory. So I slightly believe in big man theory, because I think without Hitler, I don't think there would have been the Nazi regime. I don't think that was inevitable. Mm-hmm. There might have been a communist regime in Germany, Could have been any number of different scenarios. It could have become a dictatorship effectively. They could have cancelled democracy. But Hitler is absolutely the motivating icon around the Nazi movement, and I can't see it happening without him. But with him, suddenly all these other weasels come out of the shadows. In terms of the Allies' ability, this is my theory. I think a democratic coalition, when it pulls together, when it pulls its resources together for a single common goal, is unbeatable by any autocrat, because they're always going to be better. And the reason they're always going to be better is because they're better at harnessing stuff, and they've got more checks and balances on that ultimate power and that direction in which way something's happening. Because, someone like Churchill or Roosevelt, they were their own men. They knew what they were thinking. They had their own mind, but they were surrounded by people who gave them advice, who could say, oh, I'm not sure about that, or that's a really bad idea, or definitely not, or I think you might want to consider this. And they'd listen. Ultimately, they're making decisions, but they're still listening. An autocrat doesn't listen. An autocrat is surrounded by paranoia and suspicion at every single turn. So he's hearing what he wants to hear rather than the reality. And that doesn't make you make good decisions.
Yeah.
Now, you can be strong enough to kowtow your enemies, but when you pull together, you're going to be stronger. And this is CF, the situation right now. If Europe pulls itself together, there's 780 million people in Europe. We've got some of the greatest minds. We've got huge amounts of money. We've got all the resources. We've got access to the world's oceans. We've got everything you could possibly want at our fingertips. All we need is a bit of charisma, a bit of leadership, a bit of pulling together, a bit of glue, a bit of shared vision, and to snap the kind of people of Europe out of their complacency that everything's going to be fine, because it's not if we don't do something about it, but it will be if we.
Why does it take us so long, though? Why does it take us so long?
Because it always does. Because we're complacent. There's that great line from Maynard Keynes, who's writing about the economic consequences of the Versailles Treaty. He's writing this book in 1990s. He's just despairing at the kind of peace treaty that's being pulled together following the catastrophic First World War. And he goes back and he goes, just consider, you're a reasonably well-to-do guy living in London. You can telephone your mates. You can eat pretty much anything you want from all around the world. You can travel in a way that's more simple and quicker than it's ever been ever before in mankind. The world just seems full of possibilities. And you cannot imagine for a minute that this progress this steady progress is ever going to end. And then suddenly it's August 1914. And the catastrophe hits the world, and all the rest of it. You have the First World War, and millions dead, and the catastrophe of the early part of the 1920s, and wheelbarrows of money, and all the rest of it. And that's the point. We have reached that point now where we're just being a bit complacent. We're taking things for granted. We're feeling entitled. We're in the West. We can do what we like. All we're worried about is sort of what's going on reality TV shows, and what the next blockbuster set is going to be on Netflix and stuff, and who's trending on TikTok, rather than kind of looking that bigger world around us, which is actually starting to corrupt in a very, very bad way. Wake up, everybody. That's the bottom line.
I think it's so well said, and it stumps me, and I remember, we had Nazi sympathizers in the United States, Nazi sympathizers in the UK, and yet people get around it. I mean, we both remember Ambassador Joe Kennedy.
Yeah. And what a scallywag he was.
Yeah. I mean, we remember, he was literally, it's surprising to me, given what Joe Kennedy did, that it didn't cost his son, Jack Kennedy, that election. Do you know what I mean?
Amazing.
Yeah.
Well, and he's cut from a different kind of sort of cloth, isn't it? Because I've just been re-looking at his inauguration speech in 1960. And what does he say? He says, don't think what America can do for me. Think what you can do for America. And citizens of the world, don't think what America can do for you. Think what you can do for the world. There you go. That's the mantra that everyone needs to get a grip of right now.
Right.
We need to move out of our selfish, isolationist bubble, looking just in front of our nose, and and see the bigger picture.
The irony is that Churchill despised his father, but Jack Kennedy loved Winston Churchill. He took a lot of those ideas from Churchill's speeches, right? I mean, about the world. You remember and Churchill's theories about the United States of Europe and unifying Europe and so forth. I want to go to something in the book that really struck me. I mean, it's so many striking stories, but I want to talk about Alan Moskin. He's a
Oh
private,
yeah,
of course, from New Jersey. I'm going to mispronounce this because I'm a Italian from Long Island, so forgive me, but he stumbles into Gerskirchen camp, I guess it's called.
Gunskirchen.
Yeah.
Gunskirchen.
What is this camp? Tell us about this, and how important was it for you to pick some ordinary soldiers in this story? Because
Yeah.
I thought that was a brilliant part of this story because,
Oh, I'm so glad.
my uncles, sir, were ordinary
Yeah.
soldiers, and they
Yeah.
saw atrocities that they never liked to talk about. But tell us about this private, this young man.
Yeah, well, the whole thing came about because Al and I were discussing how you can't do a book about the end of the war and not confront the Holocaust and the camps and all the rest of the liberation of the camps. And, like all these things in the Second World War, there's the kind of the key names, aren't there? The kind of star names, Dachau, Belsen, Auschwitz, obviously, and so on. Ravensbrück. These are the names that people most people who know anything about the Second World War, know anything about the Holocaust, have heard of those names. No one's heard of Gunskirchen. No one. And the point is this, that what we wanted to show was, rather than trying to kind of cover the whole thing, we wanted to illustrate the liberation of the camps through the eyes of one victim and one liberator. And we wanted them to have a connection. So we didn't want the liberator to be at a different camp. We wanted them to be at the same camp. We wanted it to be one of the forgotten camps. So all these main camps had, like Mauthausen or whatever, had satellite camps, and Gunskirchen was a satellite camp. And all of them were horrific. I mean, particularly by May 1945, because Germany's run out of food, run out of supplies, and the last people to get looked after are your slave labor, of course. So we also, then after I thought, wouldn't it be interesting to have an American who was not from, a superstar division. The big ones are the 3rd Infantry Division, which had more days of combat than any other, had Audie Murphy in it, the most decorated U.S. serviceman of World War II, or the big red one, the 1st Infantry Division that landed on Omaha Beach, whatever it might be. All the 2nd Armored Division, Hell on Wheels. We don't want the kind of the celebrity divisions. I wanted a forgotten division no one's ever heard of. So we chose the 71st because they only arrived in Europe in February 1945, for goodness sake. And my guy, Alan Moskin, only comes into action in March, but that doesn't belittle his experiences. Those kind of 3 months of combat that he sees are absolutely awful. That's enough to keep you going for a lifetime times 10, frankly, what he saw. So we wanted a division that wasn't well known, and I also wanted a Jewish American soldier. So suddenly there's this guy from New Jersey, who's a Jew, who's in an unknown, he's an unknown bloke. He's just one of the hundreds of thousands, one of the millions in uniform, who just ends up being in this place at this particular moment. And he comes in contact with a Hungarian Jew called Hugo Grin, who, by a miracle, has managed to survive, Auschwitz and the Hungarian roundups and unspeakable privations and hardships and cruelty, and makes it through. And so there was a kind of beautiful bit of synergy there that when I so basically I thought about an unknown camp, then I found Hugo Grin. Then I thought, okay, well, I want to find someone from the 71st. So I started researching the 71st Infantry Division because they liberated it. And then I just found bingo. I found Alan Moskin, and, the fact that he was Jewish was just perfect. And sometimes, when you're researching, these little bits of jigsaw just slot together just absolutely beautifully. It was like they were all kind of sort of made for one another. And as a storyteller that you've hit gold. And I think because all those three, the camp and the division and the liberator and the liberated are all completely unknown, I think it's much more powerful as a result.
Yeah, listen, it's an amazing part of this story. And, and I know I've told you about my uncles and their assault on Normandy Beach. Also, one of my uncles fought, 2 of my uncles actually fought in the Battle of the Bulge. And
wow.
And they were common infantrymen. And my cousin actually took his GI suit and had it dry cleaned recently. He has it hung up in his store.
How amazing!
And I just think about these men. I mean, they were, running their lives, ordinary people. Yep. They got thrust
answering
into
the call.
War. Yeah, and also to see the horror, I mean, and by the way, we don't talk about it, James, but Joseph Stalin had high levels of horror going on as well, but we referred to him because he was one of our allies, frankly, as Uncle Joe. But I mean, he killed
Yep.
millions of people. He was treacherous,
he was.
and in many ways was Hitler-like, but we don't see him in the same way.
Yeah, I mean, I most certainly do. I've just been sanctioned by the Russians this last week.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, for speaking out against them. I mean, not only were they cruel and corrupt, they were just unspeakably profligate with people's lives. I mean, it's interesting, but you think about the kind of final battle for Berlin. It starts on the 16th of April, finishes on the 2nd of May with the defeat of surrender of Berlin. In that time, the Red Army, which is totally overwhelming compared to the pretty feeble German defenses, which is, yes, there's a handful of old hands and old Wehrmacht veterans and Waffen SS types, but the vast majority are kind of teenage boys and old men. The Red Army loses 800,000 casualties in that time, a little over 2 weeks. I mean, what the heck? What are you doing? How can you be that bad that you're in your generalship? I'm not complaining about the individual
doing it
soldiers
again in the Ukraine, though.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Nothing
doing the
has
exact
changed.
same thing that they did then.
Exactly.
They're just throw the people out there, cannon fodder, obliterate the people.
Yeah, the cruelty is unspeakable. It's unspeakable.
It's horrific. But I just find listen, that I'm always learning something in your writing. Unfortunately, I only this is a goal hanger podcast now, by the way. I don't know if you know that, but Open Books Goal
I didn't
Hanger,
know that.
we have it limited to 30 minutes. So I've got to, unfortunately,
you got to stop.
I got to push ourselves to the end here, but I want to bring up 5 words that Holly and I, my producer, put together from the book. And what we'd like you to do, James, I'm going to say the word, and I want you to come up with your first impression and give me a few sentences. Okay, you ready?
Go on. Yeah.
I say the word Germany. You say what?
What, in terms of 1945?
Yes, 1945. I
say absolute delusion. I mean, the delusion of the high command at the end is a tragedy. I found it just breathtaking how stupid, deluded, cruel the leadership that took over once Hitler shot himself was. I mean, have these guys not learned anything over the previous 6 years? I mean, Dönitz, Keitel, all these guys, they're just, what were they doing keeping it going till the 8th of May? I mean, 7th of May. I mean, it's crazy.
But also the people, sir, I mean, if you look, Hitler's approval rating in April of 1945, still in the mid 40s. I mean, it's just sort of crazy, right? I mean,
it's incredible. Well, that's brainwashing for you. I mean,
yeah, exactly.
The world is littered with instances of large numbers of people falling for complete bullshit.
I'm
believing stuff.
I'm well aware of that, sir, and the contemporary aspects of that as well.
Right. Okay, and this is why the study of history is so important, because it can teach us stuff about today. And
yeah, exactly. Let's go to Japan.
Right.
I say the word Japan. You say what?
Fuck. I say yet more delusion. I say delusion and tragedy. I know I'm cheating by having 2 words. Again, these guys at the top, they've just got themselves into a god almighty mess that they're not willing to confront. They're not willing to have a realistic exit clause. It's kind of all or nothing. And this kind of warped nonsense that somehow suicide is better than defeat, or this sort of warped notion of honor is just bonkers.
No, it's
even after the first atomic bomb on Hiroshima, they're still faffing around, kind of refusing to throw in the towel and not even believing it's an atomic bomb. I mean, it's just crazy. And the amazing thing about it at the very end, of course, is it's the only unconditional surrender that has a condition. Which is that the Emperor stays, and I think he stays till 1989 or something.
Yeah, he was with George Herbert Walker Bush in 1989. But MacArthur saw that, though. He understood the cultural tenet of that, and the need for that. And again, all of MacArthur's complexity, all of his vanity. And if you go to Japan today, they don't even talk about MacArthur. He's been deleted from their history books, but he is a seminal figure in the foundation.
He's a great man.
Of a prosperous Japan. Let's go to Italy.
Yep.
I say Italy, you say
I
what?
say, well, Italy. I say but that is where tragedy really needs to play its part. I mean, I've done so much work on the Italian campaign. I've spent so much time with Italian veterans. Italy at the end of the war is that there is a glimmer of hope for Italy, I think. But the tragedy that befalls Italy. I read a book about the last year of Italy's war some years ago, and I called it Italy's Sorrow. And it's this place of the birthplace of the Renaissance. It's this place of high culture, this place of incredible history, of incredible landscape beauty, of incredible urban construction. Ponte Vecchio in Florence, or St. Peter's in Rome, or the cathedral, the Duomo in Milan. I mean, this is stuff that and opera and Puccini and let's face it, Ferrari too. It's this amazing country, and yet what befell it in the Second World War was this sort of terrible tragedy, and it makes my heart bleed every time I think about it, because I'm a massive Italophile. I love Italy.
Yeah, well, listen, I mean, it's my ancestry. My grandparents were brokenhearted about where Italy landed in that war, and and obviously you and I know the foibles there, and again, deranged leadership leads to horrific outcomes.
But again, look what happens to Italy by the second half of the 1950s into the 1960s. It's just had its second renaissance, and it's kind of emerged as this really pretty well functioning modern state where it's going to return to its heritage. Yeah, right. And today, I know it has its shortcomings, but it's still just a fabulous place to be. And
no question.
You know which city has the lowest suicide rate in the whole of Europe? Is Naples, which also coincidentally is the heaviest populated.
I was gonna say Naples, because my family's from there, and let me tell you something. We're all crazy, but we do love life. You know what I mean? There's a sense of love of life and a respect.
La vita è bella.
Exactly. So, all right, two last words. Surrender. I say the word surrender. James Holland, what do you say?
Victory for the Allies.
And what about victory?
Well, actually, I mean, I'm actually doing a book, right? A small kind of a small polemic about this right now, about that post-world view. There was two views. There was the cruel and corrupt one, which was behind the Iron Curtain, or there was the one that had first been kind of put forward by Wilson and his utopian dream in 1918. And which was picked up, the baton which was picked up and evolved by Roosevelt and delivered by Truman. And it's the one that's lasted 80 years, pretty much, and brought peace and prosperity to the developed world and the developed democracies in the Western world. And you and I have grown up in that world and are better people and happier people as a result of that.
An amazingly blessed beneficiary of that world, which is why, I look back
That's what victory means to me.
I look back on that era, and I look back on the bravery of my grandparents who arrived here in America, and my life, and I say this very humbly, James, my life could have never happened without the political leadership or even the courageous leadership of my immigrant grandparents, who literally came here with nothing, but had this wildly unconditional love affair with the country. My grandmother was so proud that her two sons went to war for America. Just to think about the time, she prayed for them, she prayed for their safety. And thankfully, one came back wounded, but okay. And obviously one survived the war, but unwounded, but both psychologically traumatized. But the point being, it was just this unconditional love affair with the country. And I grew up with that. I grew up with that spirit, and also the intellectual curiosity to understand what happened, which is why I so enjoy my relationship with you and love your books. So the title of this book is Victory 45, The End of the War and 8 Surrenders. It's written by James Holland and his podcast co-host. We Have Ways to Make You Talk, podcast, co-host Al Murray. But thank you so much for joining us on Open Book today. And James, you can't get rid of me, James. So
thank you, Anthony. Listen,
I'm going to be in your life, brother. I'm going to be in your life.
It's been such a pleasure. Thank you for having me on.
George W. Bush, in his 2006 State of the Union address, he said,
America is addicted to oil.
I don't like the word addiction. It's a necessary evil. There is a word called addiction. We have an addiction to oil. Matter of fact, we produce only about 13 million barrels of oil a day in the United States, and we need over 20. So we do need a lot of oil, and our refineries in the United States can't even handle all the oil that we produce here. So we've got a big need. We talk about the 4 T's, with Trump, tariffs, taxes, Teslas, what's going to happen on demand and what's going to happen with all the other great 4 T's that's going on. When we just talk about the need for oil, we're going to need it for a long time.
Hi, and welcome to Open Book. I am your host, Anthony Scaramucci, and joining us today is J.R. Young. J.R. is an entrepreneur podcast host. I've done his show. Thank you for having me on. He's a philanthropist. He's an author, and the title of the book is The Upside of Oil and Gas Investing, which I think is a very topical book for where we are right now and where we're going to be for the next 50 years, Jay. So we'll talk about that as well. Yeah. But it's great to have you on. Before we get into the book, regale us a little bit with your background, your upbringing, how you got into this space, and how you started your show.
Yeah, great. Thanks. And thanks for having me on. I appreciate that. Well, I love reciprocating people on each show. I think that's well,
awesome. We're doing a home and away. You put me on your show. I want to bring you on. I want people to learn about what you do and your book.
I appreciate that. Yeah, I appreciate it. Yeah, because I'm 4th generation oil and gas guy. So my great grandfather, my great grandfather and great grandmother, A.K. Turner and Grandma Birdie, they had 12 kids. Back then there was no TV, I guess, so they had 12. They had 12 kids. If you're a man, you're in the oil business, and if you're a woman, you're married to somebody in the oil business. So, man, it was just all in our family, all our reunions, everything. All we talked about was the oil business.
Hey, everyone, it's Anthony Scaramucci here with some straight talk. Let me tell you, we've got 85% of our viewers who haven't hit the subscribe button yet. What's up with that? It hurts. Listen, I made my career by going all in. Right now, only 15% of our viewers are part of our subscribed family. So please take action. This helps us book more amazing guests. Hit subscribe, join our community, and let's turn these numbers upside down. Now back to the show.
He grew up, landed his last 30 years in the business was in West Texas, Permian Basin, back in the day when there wasn't all the big fracking going on or just there were shallow oil and gas wells, but he grew up there. I spent a lot of time with my grandfather. My grandfather growing up was also in the business, and I spent a lot of weekends with him out in the oil field. As soon as he let me drive his pickup, which is the old 3-speed on the column pickup, as soon as he let me drive his pickup, I was with him, and I'd go, and he would every time we'd go by one of those oil wells, he would tell me to slow down. And he'd roll his window down the old-fashioned way with the crank, and he would listen to that oil well to see if there was anything going on with it or any noises that would weren't normal. So I spent a lot of time there, and then after school, I went into the stock business at first because when I was going through school in the early '80s and the mid '80s, man, oil and gas was not very favorable, and prices had gone from
$10 a barrel, man.
Oh yeah, absolutely, and we could not make money. And my dad, who'd spent some time in the business, got out and told me to stay out, So I did for the first 5 years. And then in 1990, I decided to get into it. I'd been in the stock business. I thought real estate or oil and gas. I decided at that point, let's go into oil and gas. And I did. And it's been incredible. I don't know where I'd be if I'd been in the real estate business, but hey, I'm in the oil business and I love it. And we raise money for funds and we drill. We're drilling. We're drill baby drill right now.
All right, so well. Listen, I think it's important for people, even environmentalists, non-environmentalists, whatever stripe you are, we use energy, and our industrial society has been set up to be reliant on fossil fuels, and it's going to be a part of our lives whether we like them or not. Yeah. And by the way, I want to get your reaction to this because I have a lot of friends that own Teslas. Again, I am a fan of Elon Musk's. I'm also a private owner of SpaceX. But an electric vehicle is generating energy, and the energy is being produced by a electrical generation plant. Most of those plants are either coal-fired, natural gas-fired, entities. Am I right or wrong?
Yeah,
So
no,
the
you're right.
energy is coming from oil and gas, whether you're using it at an electric outlet or not. And so tell us a little bit about that situation. You're from Texas, so make the case for oil and gas.
Yeah, well, true. I appreciate that, Anthony. I tell you, the big thing is what I look at, and what I think a lot of other economists look at is your demand for oil, and when's the demand for oil going to start going down? And people say 5 years, 10 years. Goldman Sachs, whatever your old company you worked with, they say, yeah, hey, 10 years from now, 15 years from now, the demand for oil is going to go down, but not until then, because Teslas do use a lot of natural gas. They use a lot of oil. There's tires on those. We don't want those tires to be $50,000 a tire if we don't have oil and gas. So we definitely do. And I know that George W. Bush in his 2006 State of the Union address, he said we have an addiction to oil. And I want to. Hey, I'm sober 30 years, so I don't like the word addiction, but it's a necessary evil. There is a word called addiction. We have an addiction to oil. Matter of fact, we produce only about 13 million barrels of oil a day in the United States, and we need over 20. So we do need a lot of oil, and our refineries in the United States can't even handle all the oil that we produce here. So we've got a big need. I don't really feel like that with population. I do know there's we talk about the four T's, with Trump, tariffs, taxes, Teslas, what's going to happen on demand, and what's going to happen with all the other great 4 T's that's going on. I know that's probably a 12 episode podcast by itself. Talk about that. But when we just talk about the need for oil, we're going to need it for a long time, especially for my lifetime. And
put your investor hat on for us for a moment.
Yeah.
And let's talk about our dollars and cents. The book is called The Upside of Oil and Gas Investing. Why should we have a piece of our portfolio in oil and gas investments?
Yeah, that's a great question.
And then how do you do it? Is it through syndication? Yeah. Is it buying the majors? Is it buying stocks or bonds? How best to do it?
Yeah. And the reason why I wrote the book is because I had a lot of my friends that wanted to invest in oil and gas, and they'd come to me and they go, I got $100,000, 200, whatever. And I'd say, oh, hey, yeah, great. Let's do it. And I said, I really do feel good about this project. And if we do this and this, we're going to make money, and I didn't know this, I did. And then I kept trying to do better. And I'm like, you know what? This doesn't work. This philosophy of just drilling a couple of wells and letting it go isn't really going to work. And they may or may not get their money back, but it may take 3 to 5 years. So, a lot of investors they like the tax benefits. We have 100% tax write-off with our funds and our projects. So they like the write-off, but then they also like to make money. So what I did is I thought through this after decades of being in the business, and I'm like, okay, I'll kind of walk you through our $35 million project that we have. It's a 5-well project. We're going to bring in $35 million, and we're going to go drill 5 wells. And then after we do that, we'll send out monthly revenue checks. Clients get 100% write-off, probably 80% write-off the first year. They get monthly income off that investment. And then after that, we'll take that asset after we've drilled those 5 wells, and we'll take that to a bank and we'll say, hey, we've got PDP, which is a producing property of X. And they'll say, okay, here's some money to go drill some more wells. So my goal is to turn $35 million into $100 million. How do you do that? Well, you do it by using leverage in a way that you're not hurting the investor. You're sending out monthly revenue checks to them, so they'll get their money back in a few years just by the monthly income. But you also want to create value and explode that value. Maybe not explode's the right word, but just increase the value of that asset so you can sell it. So you have to have leverage. You need income, monthly income, but you also have to divest it. We talk about at King Operating, we talk about ADD, which is not necessarily the Adderall, attention deficit disorder, which a lot of us entrepreneurs definitely have. Anthony, we could talk about that.
Well, I confess to that. That's for sure.
But it's called ADD because we acquire, develop, and divest, right? We acquire the asset, but it's got to be a great asset in a great area, and you have to develop it. How do you do that? Well, you do it with first equity, 100% equity. We go in and drill 5 good wells in a good and like right now we're drilling in the middle of 2 billion barrels of oil that's already been produced. It's not like we're going out and you're looking off the shore of, wherever and trying to make a huge discovery. You can't make money there. I mean, you can, but it's like a 1 out of 10 shot. I mean, the batters in the Major League Baseball, they bat better than 100. So, and that's not what oil and gas is. Oil and gas is going into an area that's developed, and by drilling wells and using that as leverage. You don't use it for leverage first; they won't let you. But clients like 100% income. They like tax write-offs. So you take the money in first, you drill the wells, use that as collateral. Do that 2, 3, 4 times, and your money turns into your dollars can turn into from 35 million to 100 million.
What are the tax benefits going on? I mean, you write a lot about that in your book. Tell us, take us through. You've made the case for the investment. You made the case for the cash flow thesis, but tell us a little bit about the tax benefits.
Yeah. Well, like last year, I was talking to my CPA, and he says, you need to make sure you invest in oil and gas. And I said, well, or invest in something because you got a tax problem. I said, okay, hey, what if I lowered my taxes by 300,000 or 400,000? He said, oh, that'd be great. How do you do that? And I said, well, obviously he knows because he's been around me a while, but what I did is I invested $500,000 in our fund at the end of last year. Okay. So I'll get a write-off of $400,000 because it's about 80% of a $500,000 investment. And I'll take $400,000 write-off. So if I made $1 million last year, let's say I don't pay taxes on the $1 million, I'll pay taxes on $600,000 last year. So that'll save me considerably in my tax bill, come on April 15th. Well, we don't pay tax on April 15th, but you get what I'm saying. So I'm trying to decrease my adjusted gross income down to a good dollar amount. And so that's kind of a roundabout way on how we look at it. Because we do know we're going to pay taxes, and we just want to lower that tax bill. Yeah,
no, listen, but it's also, there is an incentive as it relates to the way the tax system is set up to get into the industry. What would you avoid? What are some of the things you would avoid in this industry, and who's the ideal investor?
Yeah, good question. Very good question. Matter of fact, that's exactly the reason why I wrote the book. I wanted to get our name out there and just tell people, hey, man, those guys that call you on the phone, all they're looking for is one thing, and they're looking for your money, and they don't care if you make money or not. Maybe I shouldn't say it like that because I come from that industry. I learned that. I know it. I've been on that side of the phone where I'm calling people up, and I want them to make money. I do. I really want them to, because I want them to come back over and over and over again. But the chances are really good on any retail oil and gas deal, they're not going to make money. They're just not going to make money. That's why we restructured a retail project that you could get in and increase the value over a short amount of time by using leverage, going into a fund and doing that. That's the reason why I wrote the book, because I wanted people to know, hey, Forbes, I got a Forbes book, and I wanted people to know, hey, you know what? I've got people that, that want to decrease their tax dollars, but don't do it just for the taxes. I know I write about that, but people, that's the catch, because people in New York or California, we don't have a state income tax here in Texas, but still a lot of people in Texas, they make money. They want to decrease their adjusted gross income. So we have fund of funds that are participating in the projects now. We have high net worth individuals, anybody with a tax situation that, like I said, don't do it for the taxes, but hey, if you're going to do oil and gas, and if you want to diversify, find somebody like us. And I don't know anybody else like us, but if there is, God bless them. I'm glad. I'm just glad that they are, because I stood up in front of, a few hundred people the other day in a conference, and there was some oil and gas promoters out there. And I said, hey, don't invest with all these oil and gas promoters out there unless they know what the hell they're doing, because you can just, you do it and you hope you make money and you see your check, because the wells that you produce or participate in, they decline. Those wells decline. you may be producing 20% of a barrel of oil of what you did the first day. In 1 year, it may decline 80% the first year. Well, good luck on getting your money back. And it's not, I'm not saying it's a bad deal, but just you have to use leverage in that, and you also have to divest.
I think it makes great. I think it makes great sense. I want to go to renewables for a second, because there's an angle to renewables coincident to oil and gas. You write about that as well, and so tell us a little bit about that. What are some of your expectations there?
Yeah, and what a lot of companies just came out and said, hey, okay, we're not going to really spend a lot of money on that because it's hard to make money on that. So even though it makes sense for the economy, and Biden was really 100%, I mean, he was like, yes, let's do this and let's do this and let's cut off oil and gas production and all. It's tough to make money on renewables. It's tough to have alternative types of energy other than what we already know. We already have the infrastructure set up. We already have a lot of, it's a $4 trillion industry. It is right on, like number 7th industry in oil and gas. So we're not going to go away anytime soon, but also renewables. It's hard to catch up, and it's hard to become profitable. But I was on Routers or something the other day, or somebody asked me questions about this. And I said, well, hey, 2 reasons. Number one, politics. People love to hear about the politics of renewables and not using as much oil and gas. But number one, then number two is, does it make sense financially, or can you make money?
Yeah, no, it makes sense. You have a great show, Jay. I've been plugged into it now. One of my friends introduced me to you virtually. Actually, before I met you because I was tuned into your show. Tell us about your show, the Jay Young Show, which of course I was a recent guest on. How'd you get it started? How do you think about curating your guests? What are the topics that you like discussing?
Yeah. As healthy, wealthy, and wise, I guess, hey, we may talk about the Bible. We may talk about your success. We may talk about what's going on with you. We do have a Wednesday or Monday, 3:00 Central. We may talk about only oil and gas and what's going on. I may have my landman on, which isn't Billy Bob Thornton. Billy Bob, if you're out there, you're welcome to come on the show anytime. We'd love to have you.
Do you watch that show? Is that show accurate depiction of the industry?
Yeah, that's good. You can also watch me on TikTok. I'm doing the true false landman questions on it. Like Jerry Jones. I mean, you mentioned on my show. You mentioned that the New York Mets. They need. Cohen needs to let some of the decision making go. Well, hey, I'm a Dallas Cowboy fan, unfortunately, and Jerry Jones doesn't do that. But he was on the show, and he mentioned, like, I drilled 4 wells in Northern California near outside Palo Alto, and I made enough money to buy the Dallas Cowboys. That was false. There's a Boobs and Babes coffee shop that outside that you drive through that oilfield workers starting at 5:30 in the morning, they stop. And that's true. There are places like that in Odessa with women in bikinis handing out coffee first thing in the morning. That'd have been a great entrepreneurial deal. And there's just, I think it's a lot of Hollywood, but it's like 30-40% of it's true, and then everything else is kind of compounded. Like wells blowing up. Wells don't blow up like that. But there's a lot of good stuff on it. But it was really good in the industry to see the oil and gas industry, and we're using a lot of that material, and to help tell more people about what's going on in the industry, and how can you invest in oil and gas. Hey, I'm not telling you should. I think you should invest in oil and gas, but I'm not telling you to invest in oil and gas. But if you do, I think you should really look at our product very, very hard. But yes, I think it's really a great show.
So let's go to let's go to Jerry for a second, if you don't mind me asking, because I love him. He's been at my conference. You and I talked about the SALT conference.
Yeah.
And I thought his depiction on the show and the story that he told, which he told at our conference, by the way, so I know what Jerry said to John Hamm and Landman is true, and it wasn't acting, because that was Jerry telling the story, and I'm sure he's told it many, many times. And so the question I have, though, is controversial. I got to ask it, though, okay? because I love the Cowboys from a distance. I'm a Roger Staubach fan. I remember Drew Pearson. I grew up with all these people watching them in the games, Tom Landry, etc. And Jerry won twice without being involved in the football operations. He won twice. He's been involved with the football operations for 31 or 2 years since he won the Super Bowl twice.
Mm-hmm.
What is the stubbornness there? What is the definition of insanity is you repeat the same thing over and over again without, you're expecting a different result, but you're not going to get one. Okay. So
Right.
Go ahead. Give me the brain chemistry there. You're a student of people.
Yeah. I think it's more about family, and he says in the show, and he is tearing his eye, and he is very emotional, and it is true. If you go up to the Star here in Frisco, up north of where we are today, but if you go up north, you'll see Jerry Jr. there. You'll see Steven. You'll see Charlotte. You'll see them. He does talk about family, and he is 100% engrossed in family. And every time you see him out, he's with his family. I mean, it's like there's no question about that. But it's like Magic Johnson, after the Redskins, or I'm sorry, not the Redskins, the Commanders. Yeah, Commanders. When they won one of those playoff games, he says, "You know what? We gave the ownership. We got new ownership, which gave the coach, which gave the GM. But Jerry just loves getting his hands right in the middle of everything, and he won't let go. And it's like he'd much rather deal with his family, and he's done extremely well financially, 10, 15 billion, whatever he's worth. But he just won't let it go family wise. He wants his family to be there, and it's all about, is this for business or pleasure or family or whatever, and he just won't let go.
All right, I get it. I have to ask. Okay, so
yeah.
So Jay, how do people find you? What's your Instagram? What's your social media?
Yeah, J.R. Young. If you look if you Google Anthony Scaramucci's best friend, new best friend, that's Jay Young.
Okay.
No, but
so on Twitter, you're at Jay Young.
J.R. Young text. Yeah, I don't have a lot of Twitter. That's one thing I'm really concerned about or doing better on is the Twitter. But I've got I'm on Twitter. I've got J.R. Young TX on Twitter.
All right.
We're on LinkedIn. We're on Instagram, Facebook, all the other. If you look under kingoperating.com, that's where we are as well.
Mm-hmm.
I did have jryoung.com, but you can find me there and write in. I'd love to reply back to readers to find out what they think. What could we be doing better? How can we help you?
Mm-hmm. All right, good stuff. I end my podcast every week with 5 words. We go through your book. We went through a little bit of your show. I'm going to list the 5 words. You're going to give me a reaction to the word. It's almost like a Rorschach test. You give me a sentence, you give me a word, whatever comes to your mind. I say the word risk. You say what?
Oil and gas. Mitigating risk.
Mitigating risk. Okay, so when you hear the word risk, you think risk mitigation and you think oil and gas.
Yeah.
What about reward?
Yeah, oil and gas.
Okay.
The new way, the new model.
Okay, and that's really the central tenets of your book. Okay, so let's go over these. Then you're going to be able to predict the last 3. I say oil. You say what?
I just say it's definitely a needed product, controversial, but also a very needed demand. I think about the peak demand, what's going on, and how long we're going to need oil. We're going to need oil for a long period of time, and I just think it's not going away anytime soon.
So it's funny because when you say the word oil, I think the most important commodity in the world. That's what it is to me.
Yeah.
Everybody needs it. You and I couldn't be talking to each other right now. We didn't have it. We wouldn't have the electricity on.
Yeah.
I say the word gas, a little different from oil. So what do you say when I say the word gas?
Yeah, I think about natural gas instead of a tank or a gallon of gas for your car, but I think about natural gas, and I think that it's a great product, and we're starting to LNG export a lot of natural gas here. So it's a clean burning fuel. It's something that definitely needed, and there's going to be a lot more demand for it because of us liquefying it, and there's a lot of Trump's opening up some of the ports down so we can export it. So I think there's a good need for it, and I love drilling for natural gas because they're so much easier than oil because there's not as many moving parts. But that's just on my side of would you rather drill an oil well or a gas well? I grew up with oil wells and pumping units, but gas wells are very, very easy to drill, and there is also a big need for that as well in the United States.
Okay, and more energy efficient than oil, or no?
Yeah, you mean cost wise?
Natural.
Yeah, because there's not, like I said, there's not as many moving parts, and there's not pumping units and downhole motors. There's rods, there's tubing, there's all these different products, and you have to and gas, as you can imagine, gas coming out of the ground and how fast it comes out of the ground is a lot better, more efficient to come out and just go right down the pipeline into and goes right straight down the pipeline instead of oil, which comes out in a liquid, and it has to go up and has to go into a barrel, and then you have to transport it out of a barrel, and your pumper has to have to have a pumper that goes by there every day and measures how much oil is in the tanks. Well, not today as much. Most of our wells are by Skylink, but a lot of them are. But natural gas is just so much easier. It's so much easier to drill and operate than oil.
All right, investing. I say the word investing. You say what?
I say I want to put together the best investment, oil and gas investment product available for investors to come in. I mean, for people that want to put in, less than $100 million, we have a $100 million fund right now. We have a $35 million fund, but I want to put together the best oil and gas investment vehicle that I can for investors. That's my legacy.
All right. And what's next for you, Jay?
I think after this, after being on your show, man, who knows, right? I mean, sky's the limit. No.
Oh, yeah.
My kids to grow up, I need to read the Bible every day, which I do. And I want to be a better person. I want people, it's not about respecting me. I want people just to listen to me because I want to give plenty of knowledge out for not only the Jay Young Show was originally for the 16 to 22-year-old. So I could tell them stories about people like you. How did you get to where you are? I mean, man, you've been extremely successful.
Hard work,
there's a lot of a lot of things there.
Learning.
Yeah. How can we fall on our face and get back up, which we talked about on the show, which I really love. How can we do that? That's what I want to do. Is I want more people. My wife says, what are you doing this Jay Young Show for? What do you what? And I said, I want people to have learning experiences. I want to know that, hey, you know what? If somebody ever said, hey, I wanted to go into real estate, or if I wanted to go into whatever the case may be, they could listen. They could listen on the Jay Young Show and be resourceful, be thoughtful, be something that they would appreciate.
Well, I really appreciate you being on with me today. The title of your book is The Upside of Oil and Gas Investing. It's by J.R. Young, who's also the founder and anchor of the Jay Young Show. And I really appreciate you being on. Thanks, Jay.
Absolutely, man. Thank you very much. Hey, great. Appreciate it. I look forward to staying in touch.
All right. Hey, thank you for watching this episode. If you enjoyed this episode, here's another one right up here